So the first one, and I mentioned this at the beginning, I know it's a little bit older, but I wanted to use the MSBlaster worm as an example of establishing a fingerprint. And for those that aren't familiar, this was a worm, right, that took advantage of an RPC vulnerability in Microsoft Windows, basically using port 135, and then infected machines would attempt to propagate the worm to other machines inside of the network, basically launching a distributed denial of service attack, and certain dates, etc. Now, you wouldn't know this ahead of time. I just bring it up as a reminder. This is things that you might identify, along the way, when you're establishing or identifying this attack fingerprint. So the way one starts with that, many ways to start, but I bring this up first because this might be one of the more visible things that you see. If it was a brand new type of attack and nobody knew it was coming, one of the first ways somebody might see it as an individual user might see something odd happen on their computer, which is one of the things that was here. That individual user brought up their machine, and here we go. They saw this particular message, right? I just wanted to say, love you, Sam, Billy Gates. Why do you make this possible? Stop making money and fix your software. So of course that tells you something has happened, but there's something deeper than that in here, and that's why I bring it up. The fact that there's this, text on the screen, is now we're already starting to do our crime scene investigation, right? We're already starting to collect data, and put it in the little baggies, etc. Because this is some interesting text here that may come into play for us in the future as we're trying to develop a fingerprint for this attack. This is part of its fingerprint. It displays this on the computers that it infects. So it is an important piece of data. Then using network analysis type techniques where we're looking at all the packets on the network, and again the importance of the network recording, because if we had our network recorder in place and we were recording as this breach happened, we would have all of this information and it would go back. One of the other things we see as an attack fingerprint for this worm is there's this odd TCP three-way handshake right here before starting a TFTP session, which you start to see down here. And that might be something that is not that typical on your network anymore. You don't have a lot of TFTP traffic, and you certainly don't have your machines on your network doing three-way handshakes with machines outside of your network to do TFTP. Even if you are doing any TFTP, it's probably being done internal to your network. So this is another key aspect of the fingerprint, right? Once that kicks off, we see that the machine that's been infected now doing a TFTP download, right? Well, what's happening in this download is, again, important information. It's all part of the fingerprint. We can see in terms of the intruder, the from to, right? In this area where we're looking at IP addresses, we at least now have an IP address of where the infected computer connected to bring down the worm. A very key piece of information, right? That may change over time. It may move around, but at least you have an idea now, at least in that initial attack, where did that infected computer reach out to bring the infection into the network. Brought up the screen earlier, right, that showed what was on the host user's machine. Again, the fact that we've done our network forensics and we've captured all of the information, we can go also look at even the payloads of those packets. And as we look in the payloads, we see parts of that fingerprint again, right? We see right here the MSBlaster.exe where it starts the application. We see right here the I just want to say, love you, Sam. We see that text, right? So now not only was that something that got displayed on somebody's machine, but we know it's in the payload of a packet. That gives us a fingerprint. It gives us something to search on and to be monitoring for in the future to make sure that we don't, make sure that this attack doesn't happen again. And even in there, we can even see the activation command for the blaster worm, right here, where it sends the execute command to 10.11.31. So again, all parts of that fingerprint, right? So what then starts to happen is that infected workstation now starts to attack others, right? The 10.1.131 now starts to scan, looking for other nodes, and you see this right here on the network, right? Another part of the fingerprint where it does that, where it scans and looks for other machines in your IP range that are possibly vulnerable to getting infected. So all that we're able to do because go back 1 minute. All that we're able to do because we've now done our network recording. We have our network recording device right there at the firewall. We've captured all of these packets, and as we analyze the packets, a fingerprint for the attack comes out very clearly. Right? So, we see all the things that I had on the first slide as a summary, right? We see how this happens. We see that, a machine, gets infected, gets back to the DOS prompt, it executes a command, MSBlaster.exe, which has that machine go out, start a TFTP session over the network with another machine, download the infection, bring it up on that machine, and then have that machine start looking at other machines in the network to see who else can be infected. All that we were able to determine, by doing analysis, basically and network forensics of the information that we stored in our network recorder to be able to put together that fingerprint. And a little further on, we're going to see how do we use this information, right, to then be able to prevent this in the future, and that's just going to come up in just a few minutes. Once you're able to establish that attack fingerprint, it's pretty easy because we learned things like I showed through some of those screenshots, right? We learned things like which were the target ports where the communication was going on, right? We learned things like, were there certain commands being executed like MSBlast, right? Were there certain patterns inside the payloads? We saw where MSBlast was inside the payloads, right? Are there certain types of network protocols that are being used, TFTP, right, etc. So we can quite easily, using the same system that we're using for network recording, build filters inside of there. And that's exactly what this is, a very simple filter. This does not take long at all to build. It takes a minute or two to build this. Of course, coming up with the network fingerprint, with the attack fingerprint, takes a little bit longer, but based on that attack fingerprint, we come up with this filter, and then we can have this filter always running in the background. And we should never see a packet. That's the idea behind this kind of filter. Never see a packet. As soon as we see a packet that's a result of this filter, we know there's an issue, and we take immediate action on that. I have a capture that I'm going to replay that has the type of packets in it for the MSBlaster worm. And what I actually developed as part of that was a very simple filter, which really even just looked for one part of what was going on with that particular worm, which was the port it was using, right, and some of the one of the key values that was being shared as part of that. So what I'm going to do is close that, and I'm going to close this filters, and then we're going to run through this capture file that has the worm packets in it, and as part of that, what you're going to see, we're also running the filter. So, again, as I mentioned earlier with this type of filtering, these are the type of filters where you don't want to see a packet. If you see a packet, that means something's gone wrong. And these are great filters to run because they really take a lot less of the resources in terms of doing the analysis, because it's not going ahead and processing and doing statistics on every packet. It's filtering out all the packets except the ones that meet a certain criteria. And again, you don't want to see the packets. So, I start the capture, I started running through my file, and I see a packet. Well, right off, that tells me that something bad has happened. We now have a packet that has made it through that filter, and that filter defines the fingerprint for the MSBlaster worm attack. So, again, that's the only thing we're going to see. We're going to see it happen once because there was only one machine at first that actually was the infected machine. Now, as more machines started to get infected, we'd see more and more of these packets come up. But it's very important then to show how these simple filters that you can run in the background after you've established your attack fingerprint, running them from your network recording box, which is right there at the firewall, how this is going to basically keep you safe on an ongoing basis.